Thanks for coming on, Chris.
You're welcome. Although I think I may have one of the longest names in travel, but not necessarily one of the biggest names. I think we'll give that one to Richard Branson or somebody like that. But although the numbers, amateur travel has been downloaded more than 5 or 6 million times. So I love it. So I live in Silicon Valley, and I am a tech guy here, where this tech is coming from is something that I particularly enjoy, and have lived here for a number of years now, over 20. Well, my wife has some criteria. Is willing to live someplace in the United States that is near a beach, near a major city with a National League team. So I think that kind of narrows us down once we eliminate Florida to San Diego. So I have no idea. I can't picture retiring at all. I think I'm a workaholic, so picturing retiring is hard to picture. Well, I'm a fan of podcasting in general. I'm a huge podcast nut. So I subscribe to about 70 podcasts right now that I am pretty much up to date with all of them. And I'm down, that's 70 down from 100 that I was subscribed to at one point. And so back when I started listening to podcasts in 2005, really just after podcasting started, I decided I wanted to do my own podcast. And I debated doing a tech podcast. I debated doing a religion podcast. And we had some friends over for Memorial Day that year. And all the best stories were travel stories. And that's when the Amateur Traveler, the idea came at that time. And the show launched about a month later. It was good. TripAdvisor is a very well-run company. Of all the companies I've worked for, and I've worked for a number of startups. I worked about 18 years in startups, and then I worked for Hewlett-Packard, IBM, and Apple. So I've worked for some well-known brands as well. And TripAdvisor was probably the best run, at least at the time I was there, of all of those companies. They really know their business. They're really smart. The commute was a bit long, though. I had a 2,700-mile commute. So that's what eventually led me to leave TripAdvisor. I would probably pick somebody who is maybe a travel writer, maybe Bill Bryson, whose travel writing I have particularly enjoyed. I think he would be an enjoyable travel companion. Yeah, of Amateur Traveler, nearly 400, and then another 148 of This Week in Travel, which is my second travel podcast. In terms of favorite episodes of Amateur Traveler, it's tough to choose. Probably the one that sticks in my mind the most, though, is I talked to Andrew and Friedel Grant about their trip to Iran. They biked across Iran for 3 months. They were able to do that because they were on a Canadian visa. Canadians can do that. Americans couldn't. So it's not a trip that I would ever be able to do, not legally at least. But their interactions with some of the locals just was quite memorable. The best story they told, for instance, was they were trying to use a local payphone to try and call ahead, because they were biking across all of Central Asia after this, and they wanted to get their visas in order. And as they went to use this phone, apparently the phone system in Iran is notoriously unreliable. So somebody stopped by and said, hey, can we, I see you're trying to use the phone. You want to borrow my cell phone? Can I help you out? And then somebody else stopped by, and then somebody else stopped by. And so they sent me a photo of 5 people on 5 different cell phones, helping them get 5 different visas. And so it's just a very different picture than what we have potentially of that country and of those people. So that's one of the reasons I think that one really sticks in my mind, and definitely a place I would love to see. A huge fan of history, so I would love to go to Persepolis, for instance, the ancient Persian capital, and that is in Iran. Hello. We're going back a bit in time. So I met Bill Gates in 1989, I think, 1989. 1990, when I was working in my first startup, Momenta Computer, which was a pen computer market during the great pen computing scare of the late 80s, early 90s. And I went up to a meeting at Microsoft where we were trying to convince them to work with us. We did eventually later on ship their first Windows for pen computing device back in 1992. But it was a little odd because I was being introduced as our handwriting recognition expert, and it was sort of true in that I had done the most reading of anybody at the company at the time on that technology, but I didn't really know anything. And so it was a little nerve-wracking when you're meeting somebody who you have heard a lot about, and you're being introduced as this expert that you feel a little bit of a sham. People had said that pay attention to how Bill sits in his chair, because if he starts rocking, that means that he's interested. And so you're sort of keeping one eye on his body posture to see how he is reacting to what you're saying, and whether he's going to start rocking back and forth in his chair. So an interesting experience. I'm definitely more into podcasts. In terms of reading about travel, my leisure reading doesn't tend to be as much about travel. It tends to be more about a history or business or something like that. Of the books that I have read, well, I mentioned Bill Bryson, so I'd probably have to pick Bill Bryson's In a Sunburned Country as one of my favorite travel books, as he talks about traveling around Australia with his particularly wry sense of humor and all the things that can kill you there. But that would be one of the things one of the travel books that I particularly enjoyed. Well, hopefully I'm about to start my dream job. I leave my day job actually in 2 days. We're recording this on a Wednesday, and on Friday is my last day at a job, and I'm going to work for myself. And the plan is to work for myself, give myself the freedom to travel, to work from the road, just as long as I don't work too much from the road, because I still have a marriage, a house, and a mortgage. But basically to be able to have the flexibility to work from anywhere. And then I'll be working on some things in the blogger social media space, specifically targeting travel bloggers to start with, and the people who are trying to get in touch with travel bloggers. So I'm hoping that is my dream job. So that's certainly the plan for now, at least. Well, Venice is probably one of the favorite cities that I have been to. Just an amazing city. But I'm going to say, since most people have heard of that, I'm going to say Istanbul. It's probably one of those two in Istanbul because fewer people go there. And especially as I mentioned, a huge fan of history, being able to go out there and walk the walls of Istanbul that were built in the and stood up to all invaders, or most invaders, until the 1400s. That was pretty amazing to me, and seeing some of the ancient monuments and such, and then the colors of the spice market and the just an interesting place. So I Venice or Istanbul, but I'm going to go with Istanbul. Probably whatever camera I've got right now. I'm just using an old, I'm using a Canon T1i, which is an SLR camera. It is not the newest in that line. In fact, I think they're 3 generations newer. I don't like to carry a camera that I would be afraid to get lost or stolen in, especially when I go someplace like Tanzania or whatever, where your camera might easily be more than a year's wages to somebody there. So I like a good, I'm a fan of the Canon family of cameras, have had a number of them, and love a good small portable SLR, something that's not too heavy, that I don't feel tired after carrying around all day too. And then I tend to use a lens that is adaptable, that goes from like 18 to 200 millimeters, so that I got a good zoom lens, so that I can zoom in on the details of that person over there, or that piece of the building that I'm interested in the distance. I mean, the biggest tip, I have a surefire tip to make everybody think you are twice as good as a photographer than you are. And that is, before you show your photographs, delete half of them. And I think that literally, seriously, that part of becoming a good photographer is obviously taking a lot of shots. It's trying things out, taking it from different locations, trying up high, down low, different settings, and then I think just learning from that, throwing away the ones that didn't work, throwing away the ones that aren't unfocused. That will have people think you are twice as good a photographer if you just do some editing afterwards, do some cropping, just simple sort of post-processing. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. The other thing then is just basically practice to develop a photographer's eye, which I am still learning to do. I am getting better, but there are people who are still better than me for sure. It just takes take a lot of shots. That's one of the wonderful things I love about digital is that there's no cost to taking a photo. You can delete it if you don't like it. You don't have to keep it. It just takes up space on your hard drive, space on your card. So carry enough cards, carry enough battery life to be able to shoot photos all day, and then go with people who are patient enough for you to wait while you take some pictures. But try different things, try different angles, try different framing, things that you're taking a picture of. One tip that I like is, especially if you're doing landscape photography, and I tend to like landscape photography, think like a movie director. If you think about a movie, you have a long shot that establishes the scene, and then you've got your close-up shot that is, on a person's face, for instance, and then you have your mid-range shot. So think, as you look at a scene, what's the establishing shot? Okay, now I've got all the Taj Mahal, but now what can I zoom in on, for instance, to get different levels of interest? And so sometimes those one shots that are more zoomed in, that are more framing just a piece of the picture, can be a lot more interesting than the shot where you try and get everything in. And I think a lot of beginner photographers are trying to shoot the entire building and the entire landscape. And so it loses some interest, I think, by not doing some of those other shots. The one thing to do is make sure you're not carrying a case that's obviously a camera bag if you can help it, or not putting the name of your camera on the outside, and then just really being conscious of where your camera is. I usually have one hand on my camera at all times, but the weight of the camera can make a big difference in terms of whether you're still glad you're carrying it at the end of the day. And I take a lot of iPhone photos just because I'm going to have that in my pocket. And so really I'll go back and forth between the two. Both have advantages. And so just take advantage of the different ones. The one advantage to the larger camera is you tend to get with a full-size chip or scanner at the back, you tend to be able to shoot in low light more. And so that's the advantage as you get to the bigger cameras with the full-size, what am I trying to say, CCD. And there's expense in travel. Obviously, Europe is going to be a little more expensive to get there, and the cost of a night's hotel and those sort of things are going to be more expensive. I love Europe, though. I love Europe as a travel destination because it's easy, I think, is one of the things. Is you're talking about a place that we have so much in common with, both the language point of view as well as the culture of so many of the European countries, that it's a very good, accessible destination. Start in London, where they speak the same language. If you like London, go on to Paris. If you like Paris, go on to Berlin, or go on to the Romantische Straße or something, depending on what you like. If you're a wine lover, go on the Rue de Vin in France, and there's so many different places to go. Most people, can enjoy a trip to Italy. If you like pizza and pasta, what's not to love? Throw in pizza, pasta, wonderful architecture, and expressive people and beautiful landscapes. How could you go wrong? So in terms of trips, don't do too much. Our worst trip to Europe was a trip that we went to Spain. We did Spain in 10 days, and we saw Madrid, Toledo, Sevilla, Los Pueblos Blancos, Granada, Cordoba, Barcelona, Sevilla, and Avila. And that is too much. You're really pushing yourself too hard. Well, not counting a trip to Southern California, my next trip is Ireland. I'm going for a travel conference, the TBEX conference, the Travel Blog Exchange conference, which is in Dublin. And then I'm dragging my whole family along, my wife and my 2 kids and one boyfriend and 3 friends. And we're going to go tour around Ireland, especially the west coast of Ireland, for a week ahead of time. So looking forward to that. Haven't been to Ireland yet.